Go ahead and start recording then.
Let's do it.
Blue Podcast 4. I got Dan Cotter with me today, and I'm also going to turn off the volume on this damn computer. I don't need to hear beeping and notifications right now. So right before we started recording, you were talking about snacking on pork rinds. That's your thing. You said your friend turned you on to that?
Yeah, my lifting buddy. So I was telling Brian that recently I went to the doctor, and this has been a years-long battle. Go to the doctor says, hey, you need to lose some weight, you need to get more exercise, your diabetes numbers are close to diabetes, pre-diabetes, you might be falling into diabetes, dude, if you don't get your act together. So my buddy, my lifting buddy, diets all the time and has all kinds of solutions. He's like, for that crunchy thing, what you should do is eat pork rinds, because if you look at the back of the bag of pork rinds, they're heavy in fat, kind of, but they're like 70 calories versus the same serving of chips would be like 150 calories. And so I've been eating pork rinds occasionally to satisfy my snacking needs. And whether it's that or something else going on, I've lost about 15 pounds in the last 3 or 4 weeks, which is good. I need to probably lose about another 30 before my 3-month time is up, and I go back to the doctor and told him I was going to beat that nonsense, and no way I'm going on medication for diabetes.
Well, I hope not. And 15 pounds in 3 weeks, you said?
Yeah.
15 pounds in 3 weeks is quite an accomplishment. I mean, on average, 5 a week. I'm sure you might have bigger gains and smaller at sometimes, but yeah, I got down about 6 pounds, and I just feel like I plateau, where it's harder to get below that. But I think I'll get there. It's just you got to stay really disciplined with it.
You do, and that's always been my downfall as well. I go through these phases where I'm very disciplined, and then it's one of those things like you want to reward yourself, right? You work hard. We're attorneys. We worked hard. We drive all week. Then you go out with the family. Hey, let's get an order of calamari, and I'll take that cheesecake, and I can have a second slice of cake because it's I've been so good. It's like you're right back off the wagon, and you're bloated up again and even worse.
It's tough, man. It's tough because, we just went through a year of COVID, and, now that we can actually go back out, and even if things aren't fully normal, act normal. People are out there just, at the restaurant like it was pre-COVID, and it's tough when you go out, like, you want to enjoy, because, like, to your point, like, it is a little bit of a reward. Like, I go out for a nice dinner, it's like, I'm going to have what I want to enjoy the flavor, and I'm not going to worry about it too much or watch it. But I have, like, the adjustments I made. I've been eating one main meal a day and then just kind of snacking after that, and I feel like my best gains in weight loss come when I eat around 2 or 3 in a day, or 4, and then I just let that kind of burn for the rest of the evening, and then I eat little snacks. Like, one thing I've been eating a lot of lately is cocktail shrimp, because I want to avoid, like, deep fried stuff or whatever. And I'm not saying that's the best for you, because there's probably sodium and some heavy metal shit in there that'll kill you, but I eat that, and it's just like a good source of protein because there's no breading on it. You don't like fill up, you don't feel like you're full.
Right.
Another thing is I've been drinking vodka tonics with lime instead of beer, because like beer, it was like, even a light beer, I was looking at myself, like, and then the next day you can feel it. You're bloated, your gut's hanging, you're like, oh, this is disgusting. You know what I mean? So, like, I've been finding it, like, I don't feel as bad after, and also I don't blow up or get bloated from it either.
That's for sure. And yeah, I'm mostly a beer guy, and so I do drink, like, ultra lights and stuff, 99 calories. But
yeah.
The thing about those, one of the tricks that I've been noticing is like Corona and Michelob Ultra and all these things. They're like a 12-ounce can, so it's 4 ounces less than a normal bottle or something, and so that's part of the reason it's lower calories. And so the other thing is just a lot of nights, instead of drinking a beer, I'll just drink more water and just kind of hold off on that. But you're right, vodka and some of those, they don't have the calories. And you just think about it, you just have a couple beers. Say you're drinking regular beer, you have like 2 or 3 beers, out for dinner, like you said, nice dinner with all the mashed potatoes and garlic and butter and rolls and crap. And those 3 beers are like 600, 700 calories total between 3 beers, right? And so that's just excess.
It is excess, and not only that, it's easy excess, and it's you don't even notice it, because like when you're drinking it, you don't feel bad. You're getting refreshed, right? I can kind of tell now that I've been, like, when you don't drink it as much, you're like, oh, okay, I see, like, that that filling, like that thick flavor you get from beer, even if it's a lighter beer. But yeah, I try to watch it, you know, because like I just can't do it anymore. I blow up real easy from that, you know.
You know, when I was in high school, I was a sophomore, I think, and I had health class, and one of the football coaches was my health class instructor, and he said, go home and tell your parents that instead of drinking soda or other stuff that's got all kinds of toxins and stuff, that they should allow you to drink beer. And he said, why is this? He said, because it's all natural ingredients, right? It's corn and wheat and water from God's country. And I went home and told my dad that, who was a police officer and at the time, and he's like, what the F was he talking about, right? Telling 15-year-olds to go home and drink beer instead of soda because it's better for you. He said, get the hell out of here. I said, could I have a beer, Dad? He said, no. You know, my dad had stopped drinking, so we didn't even have beer at home. But he was like, you can't get the hell out of here. You know, go tell your coach that that's ridiculous.
I mean, it sounds like the guy made a pretty convincing argument.
Yeah, you know.
It's just water, you know, carbonation, some flour, some
Right.
wheat, you know, it's just, it's natural.
It's all nature, right? You just went out to the garden and picked some you know, herbs and products, and you put it in a jar and mixed it, and you could go drink it.
Who knows how this stuff was invented, you know?
Right.
But, I mean, I guess it's all relative, too, because, you know, in Europe, I think they're drinking in Germany under 18, and the teenagers probably have one with their meal. In some sense, that might help to take off the allure of overindulging. Then when you're like, I know what this beer is. This is very good. I drink with dinner all the time. I don't. And that's probably the worst mixture of a German accent and a Russian accent ever put together. But yeah, it's more natural over there. Like I think, like unfortunately in this country, I feel like we've demonized so many things that are like, you know, if done properly or in the right portions, or just for people who don't have addictive personalities, you're probably all right, you know.
Even with the food, like we're talking about, you know, my wife always talks about moderation's the key, no matter what you do, right? If you drank 8 gallons of water a day, for example, right, you would probably have some issues because your kidneys would not be able to process. Same thing, right? Like you said, it's a lot of things are made taboo, or like you can't have it till you're this age, or it's illegal, or do this or do that, and so people, you know, tend to be like, well, it's got to be great, right? Because I can't use it, so I do. I think moderation and everything is key, and maybe the Europeans have it right. The Italians have wine with their, you know, from the time they were little kids at meals. It's just part of the nature, right? And so maybe you don't say like, you know, you're going to go out and get totally bombed when you get to high school or college, and you're for the first time you're out and free, and so who knows? Maybe that's right.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there is something to it a little bit, because I know here, you know, growing up here, where I grew up here at Midway Airport, we would always find somebody older than us to buy the booze for us, get us beer or whatever we were trying to get, and we'd sneak it at a high school party. We'd be in somebody's parents' basement while they were gone for the evening at the friggin' ballet or whatever they're doing, and we'd be down there drinking in their basement or in their garage. Or sometimes some of the parents would be like, all right, you know, I think we know what you're doing, but we're going to look the other way a little bit, but just behave, because we'll come out there and check on you every once in a while. That's the different varieties you had.
Right.
So for us, like, you told us we can't drink it, like, we're going to sneak that shit. We want to see what we see everybody at the barbecue, you know, Uncle Joe acting like a friggin' savage out there, you know, when he has a few. We want to see what this is all about. The problem is that teenage brain is not developed enough. You're killing all sorts of brain cells, and you're going to make some dumbass decisions when you're a teenager drinking like that. Believe me.
That's for sure.
Not from personal experience, but some of my friends, I watched
Right.
all the crazy stuff they did over the years.
Yeah, me too. And you know, it's funny because I was telling somebody the other day when I was in high school, there was a liquor store. I grew up in the northwest side of Chicago, and it was a small little hole in the wall. And somehow some of my friends found out that if you went in there and pretended like you were an adult, you know, and you would like pass somebody, hey, John, you know, how's your family and kids? And the guys knew it at the front counter, right? They knew that you were 16, like you don't look 25 or 30, but they would sell it. And so one time I was at this party, and it was all just really like sodas and stuff, and then the parents took off for a movie or dinner. And so I went with my buddy. We load up the trunk with all kinds of hard liquor, beer, and bring it back to the party. Everybody's getting schnockered. And then there's this dude at the party. I don't know, to this day, I don't know who he was. he picked up this girl and was walking her around. I think it was her house. And so I walked up to him like, hey, dude, that's not cool. You should put her down. So he like threw her down. And then one of my buddies got into a fight. And then I went and sat on the porch. And I swear to God, like there's a fight, there's a Royal Rumble going on, like a melee. And all of a sudden the dad drives up and he comes up and he comes and sits down next to me and he's like, can you believe this stuff? Like somebody brought all this liquor and all these fights. And I'm like, yeah, but just jerks in this world. And that was me that, had gone and on the booze run. So it was one of those funny stories that, and the cops ended up coming because it was just a big commotion out in the front yard.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild. You're like, it makes me think that in my business or in my life, I always try to be the enemy as like little as possible. If I can avoid being the bad guy, because in every story and every drama, somebody's got to be the bad guy, right? It's sometimes you find yourself there by accident. But in that case, like, can you believe these guys bringing all that beer back? Like, yeah, I know.
Right?
Fucking, they're terrible, man. Doing this over here, I couldn't believe it. But anyway, I got to run.
Right.
Shame what happened there. You're going to have a big cleanup in the living room. They broke all your glass and all your vases in the living room and your lights and all that. That's crazy, too, man. Sometimes those melees, like, when you're younger, you go to a concert, they got a mosh pit, or you're at a concert and somebody gets into a fight. And, like, I got this one buddy's Army guy, and it's not just him, but any military, they want to get right in the mix right away. They're in there breaking it up, pulling people off. They got them by the shirt, and lifting them up behind them. They got them underhooks, and pulling them off from behind. And I'm like, I'm gonna go in there and break my leg and like snap my knee in the thing, trying to break these people up. I'm gonna let them have it out for a little while,
right?
Because like the police back in the day, and I'm not generalizing here because I know your dad was a police officer, but they would let them tire themselves out for a little bit first, like let these guys get in some work. Like you're gonna go in there right away while they're still a head full of steam, maybe on drugs or something, get socked. Like let them get their heart rate up a little bit, and then I'll run in there,
Right, life's too short, and you're exactly right. They let them blow off some steam, so long as it doesn't get out of hand, right? So that as long as there's no weapons pulled or other stuff, yeah. And
unfortunately, that's not the way it goes nowadays.
That's always my philosophy. That's always been I don't want to get in fights or altercations. I'm not going out in the parking lot. When I went to school in Western Illinois, central Western Illinois, we'd go across to Iowa. And those guys in Iowa were always trying to pick fights, and I went with big offensive linemen and other football players. And I'm like, look, I'm not interested in this. I'm not going out in any parking lot. I don't know how many people are out there. I don't know if they have chains or knives or guns, right? It's just not my thing. And so I've always been like you. I don't want to be the enemy, and I don't want to get in fights. I'm not a fighter. I'm a lover, not a fighter, right? That whole phrase, just because it doesn't interest me. And like you said, that the way it is nowadays, like I don't even try to look at people when they pull up next to me on the highway or on the street, right? Because you just never know, right? You give them a wrong look, and next thing you know, the glass in your passenger side of your door is broken, So
I hear you 100%. And the comedian Joey Diaz, he says you never know what somebody else is going through,
right?
And I think about that a lot because, especially when you're in traffic and stuff, it's like you have could be divorce, could be death in the family, could be like, just bad job or abusive work environment or whatever, and they're ready to snap. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of strong people out there, but there's ones that are less than strong, and those things you gotta watch out for, because next thing you know, they're going into the warehouse, like shooting people, and on the job and stuff like that. And that's why I'm like, nowadays I'm not going to be walked on, but I'm not going to like go out of my way and I always try to like, watch my, energy that I'm putting off, because people match it, man. Like if you're being like rude or whatever, like you're going to get it right back. But I always try to start from that position of respect and just know that, who knows what that guy just went through right before that, like, yep. or that girl, like they can end up snapping. And some people, you see them driving around, I just let them go by. I'm like, what I mean? I can feel that, because like when I was younger, I got into fights, fist fights, mostly when I was like grade school, high school, you know. But I'm kind of glad I got that out of my system then, because, at the time I was like, I'm game, you're younger and you feel invincible. You're like, I'm not worried about it. But like, this is the only body you have to get you through that life. They don't really tell you that. They don't drive that in your head. Like, hey, if you damage this pretty bad, like this could be it for the rest of your life. So, I don't think it's worth risking that anymore. And, traumatic brain injury, that's a very real thing. Your brain gets rattled around your head when you're getting punched and stuff. But also just the energy. I don't have that type of energy in me anymore. Like, I think my current mantra is like, I prefer peace, but I'm ready for war. Like, I'll fight if I have to. I don't want to, but if that situation arises, like, I'll give it everything I've got. But I don't go out seeking that. I don't have the energy for that. I try to really conserve my energy, because what we do, is so demanding. Everybody else's problems weigh on you because you got to solve them. That's why they come to you. So I don't have the energy to like go out and aggressively start fights. And some attorneys are like that.
Right.
They're like real fighters. Like, dude, not everything has to be like.
Right.
Like, I'm not your spouse. Like, you don't have to take this out on me. You know what I mean? Like, if you're having some bad shit, like, some people will argue about like every little detail.
That's for sure, and I'm the same way, and that's my philosophy when I deal with my clients and try to help them. When I'm going up against somebody on the other side, same thing, like drive towards peace but ready for war, and I'm pretty chill. But if you get me rankled or you really do some of that and push it, like you said, the energy you give, you get back, and it, to me, that just gets old very quickly with our profession. There are a lot of people, like you said. I think it's the diploma on the wall gives them some legal muscle, right? They think that they're invincible. Like, what are you going to do about it? But like you said, like, not everything has to be a fight, right? Some things it's just business, man. Just we can agree, right? We can get to it. Like you said, it's not your spouse, it's not family, it's not whatever, right? It's just business, right? And I'm just trying to get this shit done so I can go home and chill with my family, and I don't want to be doing war. But there have been situations. I do a lot of contract stuff, and there have been situations where on Zoom calls, on team meetings, whatever it is, like going toe to toe, right, and like getting heated and like really up close to the camera and like very agitated because the other side's just being totally stupid, right? They're just, like you said, scorched earth, fighting from the beginning, right? Everything's a fight. You say, hey, I want this for my client. Well, you're not going to get that, right? That's not how it works, because my client is so-and-so, right? You should be worshiping us because you are at the same table to sign a contract that your client can get ripped off on in the future, right?
That's kind of attitude.
Yeah. So I'm the same philosophy, and I don't have the energy either to get in fights. I don't have the drainage that comes with that kind of conflict, in real fights and real stuff. Not interested in it, and just not interested in dealing with that stuff.
I don't blame you. I don't. I feel like maybe the legal profession lends itself a little bit more to people that are already like that by nature, right? You want to know the rules. You want to know how everything works. You want to be able to use that as a sword. That's how a lot of these people are. And so they're already like of that personality type where they're like that type A or whatever that means, and just like like want to fight it out over every detail. It's like the way I look at it is like most of the time, because you and I work in transactional work, we have a goal that needs to be achieved. So we're both trying to get to that same goal to unite these parties in an unholy matrimony under a contract or whatever. But there's a destination there, and I think we can do it amicably, like friendly, for both of our clients and achieve it. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
To get what you want, sometimes you got to sacrifice in these deals. So I get that part of it, but it's just annoying to have to deal with people who are like, want to shove everything down your throat or whatever. It's like, I think people think that they're that big and important. It's like, you learned the law and you got into a bar, but like you're another human being. Like I think back in the day, It used to seem more like lawyers were these like mystical characters. You see them on TV, oh, big deal. Like now it's just like we're people, man. We're all trying to make it in this crazy apocalypse, COVID stuff.
Right. We're all just trying to eke out an existence and do the best we can and provide for our families and and that's it. And like you said, you can do it amicably. Again, these contracts, the relationship, the parties themselves, oftentimes I'll tell my clients if there's a snag or a hurdle, I say reach out to the principal on the other side, right? And the business people, you need to keep the lawyers out, because lawyers sometimes were the worst enemies of getting stuff done, because like you said, some of these people just use it as a sword, and it's like, look, we're taught and a way of thinking, we know the law, we know how to do the research, and that's all great and good, but we don't have to be enemies. again, most of these things are relationships that are going to hopefully last a long time between the parties that you're dealing with. And so why you have to have like this, scorched earth approach and be like just a total a-hole to the other side I've always said, like, I don't understand that, right? Because again, these two, the business people or the individuals, they have a common goal, like you said.
Yeah.
This unholy matrimony that they're going to sign a contract to sell their house, or they're going to buy a business, or they're going to join forces to become partners in some new venture. Why do you need to be fighting about that? And why does the contract need to be a scorched earth in a fight amongst military?
I like two things. I like opposing counsel with, and it's weird because right away that language itself puts it in an adversarial
Right.
thing. But for me, I mean, I just say seller attorney or buyer attorney most of the time. But I like the people with the can-do attitude, like the ones who are like, here's all the ways we're going to do this deal efficiently. Like, I'm going to have all this ready to go. It's all going to be set. It's basically going to be a done deal before we even sit down or whatever. Those are the people I like. Instead of like people that are going to fight about every single detail. Like, get out of the way of a good deal. They're already in agreement about these terms. Why are we even bringing extra stuff up to argue about?
Right.
The main things are covered. They're like, this, some attorneys will get in the way of a good deal. Like, sometimes you don't want to refer business to them again or something because you're like, wait, I gave that to you just for a chance to make a few bucks. You really just gotta like walk it to the finish line.
Right.
You know what I mean? But then they'll like mess it up or whatever. It's like, okay, like this, you gotta understand these people are already on pins on needles. Like, why are we making it worse? Let's just get the deal done. It should be that attitude of cooperation. If everybody had it, boom, we'd all be good to go.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of times the business people and the individuals, your clients on both sides, they've already agreed to what the things are. So again, sometimes, on both sides, I had a deal recently that finally got concluded. It was one of those very intense deals where, like I said, they were, they have great leverage, and so that's fine. But a lot of times what was happening was we'd get on the calls, it would be the lawyers from the other side, myself, and the two business people, or multiple business people on each side, and the business people would be like, thinking out loud, right? Like the other side or my side would be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, and then the lawyer from the other side would chime in and be like, well, wait a second, that's not what we're gonna do, or we'd agree on the phone, and then the next draft term would come and be like, what is this, right? Like this is like in a language I don't understand because I know I took notes. We spent 30 minutes on this particular provision. Everybody was in agreement that was cool to everybody. And now all of a sudden, because the lawyers are advising, right? And I'm probably guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. But we sometimes get in the way because we're interjecting what we think the client wants or needs, right? Or raising these red flags, right? We're going around every corner like, oh, there's danger ahead. Like if you leave the house, the brick could fall out of the wall. Well, okay, that's great, But again, the clients want to get to the finish line. And sometimes we're the worst enemies of that progress. And we're seen as that, and in-house, when I've spent a lot of time in-house, as you know, and a lot of the folks see attorneys, you see ads for replacements or for openings sometimes at law firms or other things, but the clients themselves will say that we don't want a no person, right? We don't want somebody that's a roadblock to every deal or everything's a risk, right? There's risk in everything, right? In most cases, these small business people, especially the startup people, they started from nothing, and so they're taking the risk already, right? So they know there's business risk and that there might be legal risk, but they don't want us to be the door stoppers that say, oh, you can't do this deal, right? Because if you do, you might lose $10, right? Well, okay.
Yeah. We don't want to... The problem is about, like, the attorneys that are going to stand in the way of the deal, unfortunately, you don't know it until you're like already in the transaction sometimes. Right. So it's like, it'd be great if we knew from the start, like, oh, we got the spirit of cooperation on both sides. We're going to keep it nice and simple. We won't over lawyer this. We just want to make sure it's done for everybody. In real estate law, we use standard form contracts, and that makes business easier and more efficient because you're not reviewing the same thing a million times. The most common ones that we use, there's a multi-board contract where realtor associations and attorneys associations get together and they kind of hash it out and agree what they think the current version should be or changes they should make from, things that didn't work out so well on previous versions, all this. Then you also have the Chicago Association of Realtors ones. Those are the two main contracts used in the Chicagoland area and in a lot of the suburbs here as well. So for me, I only focus on the things where there's money on the table for the most part. Is there some building code violations? Is there some tax-related issues that might cost my client more money? Are we talking about repairs or credits? Like, I focus on the main things. If it's like, if there's a homeowner association involved, there's some things I want to know about that. Has the seller who's selling, have they ever been a member of the association board? Are they aware of any large anticipated repairs coming up? Things like that. Can they rent out the unit? Because some people aren't even buying it for a primary residence. They allow dogs. You don't want to find out the Fido can't get in to the party after you purchase the condo. So those are the things I'm worried about. But if other than that, I'm not gonna. Well, we need representations and warranties on this, and this. And it's like, get out of here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Are there some attorneys though that I'm sure, maybe the ones that don't do it as much, right? They kind of dabble in real estate. I'm sure that because there's the review period, right? I'm sure there's some attorneys that are just kind of the same thing, right? Like, these are form contracts and they're trying to reinvent, like you said, stuff that's not germane. And like, you tell them, like, this is a form contract, right? Like, this is what it is. And I can imagine there's probably attorneys you run into that are like, nah, that's not acceptable, that provision, right? It's been used for 20 years. Like you said, everybody's ironed it out. But
well, the ones I get are just the ones that rewrite the contract a lot. So it's either, I've been fortunate lately that some of them, because they'll bog you down having to just read these and respond to them. But a lot of the times they'll repeat stuff that's already in the contract, and I'll just mention them, like, already in contract, or like agreed, it's already part of the contract type of thing, just to let them know, like, you're wasting time and space here. Because a lot of these attorneys don't want to get like one silver bullet of a letter that's like perfectly tweaked that covers every situation, and it's like modifying stuff it's not even a real modification of a contract term. It's just the same thing that's already in there. So it's like, all right, enough of this nonsense. You know what I mean? They'll be like, the representations in the disclosure shall be deemed remade as of closing. And it's like, well, Illinois law requires you to supplement those disclosures if you become aware of new conditions regarding the property. It's like, we'll let Illinois law govern, blah blah. We're not gonna make this endless representation. It's like, breach of contract on a written contract is already 10 years, and if you got the warranties and the representations in there, I think you got 10 years on those too. So I had one right now with this rehabber. They just fixed this house, and one of the provisions in the contract says the seller represents and warrants that all personal property like fridge, microwave, stove will be in working order at the time of close, or they're in operating condition. And I said, we're going to disclaim that warranty, because if it already has a manufacturer's warranty, like, I don't want to call from you in a year about like a water line on the fridge that's not working right. Like, figure that out on your own.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, silly little stuff. But anyhow, just to change the subject back to beer for a second.
Yeah.
I had a friend in law school would tell me that they'll give it sometimes to runners after like a marathon or after a race, because I guess the sugars and the carbs like help with the rehydration real quickly, but you only got to drink one or two of them. If you go past that, you might get hammered or something. I don't know.
I've heard the same thing. I've seen like 5Ks where they sprint, and then at the end of the 5K there's like you said, ice cold beer. And so I guess it probably does work when you think about it. When you're out and hot and come in and have an ice cold beer versus water, sometimes that beer is extra refreshing, right? Because it has more than just water. Water just has electrolytes and stuff, but it's pretty, right? It doesn't like rebalance or do anything. So I guess it does work, just like carbo loading, I guess, ahead of time. I guess it's just that probably the depletion as well, that sugar and carbs kind of give you some pep, I guess.
Yeah. Hearing you say it kind of reaffirms my thoughts on it, because I was thinking, yeah, there's probably some science to this, right? It makes sense,
Right.
You get it in your system. What an interesting one I actually heard recently, Rogan talks about this on his podcast, is getting simple sugars into your system after a very intense workout. Like, I think they said like Floyd Mayweather, after doing like a 5-6 mile run, would have like a Coca-Cola or something just to get that simple like sugar back in your system to like replenish you after just depleting the hell out of your system or whatever. So maybe there's some truth to that too. I think you said just your muscles, the way they work or the way they break down or something, need those simple sugars to kind of replenish.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
I've seen a lot of times now, and the gym I belong to, I haven't been going much during COVID. I go about once a week now with my son. But a lot of those guys were eating like sour gummy worms with like a Red Bull or something before workouts, and so they're the same thing, right? It must be, again, you wouldn't think like in a gym that you would see like gummies and crap candy, but I think that's the same type of thing. I think what they're thinking is that the sugars with the carbonation kind of gives you some, your muscles like suck that stuff in, the insulin piece of it, and it makes you ready to, work out. Who knows? There's science to some of this stuff. As we all know, though, there's also superstitions like in everything, and so some of this could be wives' tales that are have no relevancy at all.
Yeah, or it might be like a trial and error thing. Sometimes people try it, and it's like you think maybe it works at the time, and then you find out, you guys don't want to do that. I don't know. It is weird to see people with like gummy bears and stuff at the gym, because like I thought this was supposed to be the health place, so I could see if you're eating like some like chicken and broccoli, you just picking that out with your hands or whatever,
right?
With your COVID hands all over your damn chicken and broccoli, but gummy worms and stuff.
Yeah,
it's wild.
Who knows?
So you wrote the Chief Justices, the 17 men of the center seat, their courts and their times.
I did.
How was it like to get it published? How many different companies did you contact, and how did that all work out?
So when I first came up with the idea, I went to the American Bar Association. They had a very active publishing arm, and they were publishing a lot of different stuff, like bios and stuff of various people from the civil rights movement and judges and other things. And so I had a tentative green light to publish with them. They had me submit an outline and then a chapter, so I did it with one chapter of the book. And they came back with all kinds of edits and suggestions of how I should modify it. And then I sent back a revised draft. And what was happening was the American Bar Association, like all bar associations that are voluntary, membership's been tough, like just about any voluntary activity in the United States, right? Churches, anything. And so their membership was going down and their budgets were going down, and so they told me, like, we're no longer publishing like non-substantive books. If you got one on HIPAA or cyber or some other relevant topic, we may do that, but a book on the Chief Justices we're not interested in anymore. And so that was like 2016, I think it was. And so then I was asking like Mike Hyman, who I think Justice Hyman.
Yeah.
And was asking him, because he's like in close with like the publishing within legal. He told me to go to a couple places, and like a lot of law schools used to do it. University of Chicago has a press, and Yale and Kansas and other law schools. So I started reaching out, and a lot of those were telling me the same story as the American Bar, like, hey, this just isn't profitable. It costs a lot of money to be a publishing arm, to have editors and do all this stuff, and then get inventories of books that we never sell. So finally, I went to the North Carolina University Press, and lo and behold, they had stopped publishing their own books as well. But they said there's this guy from 12 Tables Press, this guy from Fast Case that's publishing. And so finally, in the fall of 2017, in October of 2017, after talking with him, we entered into a contract. I had 1 year from October 1st, 2017 to submit this book. And so that was a long journey, about 2.5 years, just to find a publisher. And then once I got the contract, then it began in earnest, actually drafting and taking all that time.
That's crazy. I didn't realize that would be the nature of the struggle, is just finding somebody to publish it, and then you got to work out the terms of how it's going to go down and deadlines and things like that.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, that you have to try a few different avenues to get it done, but it's good that you did. It's really cool. I mean, I knew one more friend that was working on a book, and I don't know when it'll be finished or when she's putting it out or whatever, but I mean, I think you're the only published author I know personally. That's pretty cool that you pursued it all the way to the end like that.
Yeah, thanks. And on LinkedIn, I'm part of a group where there's a lady that's a publishing helper and editor, copy editor, and she posted like in the last week or so, she posted a story about somebody that came to her 10 years ago with a book idea and like a book, and having the same type of trouble, like the very narrow or whatever it was. I don't even know the topic. And 10 years later, finally, that person got published, but it took 10 years to find a publisher and stuff. And I get those questions a lot because I'm published, but just because a lot of people ask it, we're lawyers, right? So we know everybody. So, I always get those questions like, here's a kid's book, here's a young adult book, here's whatever, right? A gardening book. Do you know any publishers? And like law, it's pretty amazing that these publishers and these publishing houses are very narrow, right? Like, we only write books about, cooking diesel fuel, or whatever, and so, but 12 Tables, that's all they focus on. The guy who's the head of it, his family is involved in the publishing business, and he works at Fastcase, which is a competitor to Lexis in Westlaw. He's the number 3 person there, so this is kind of a side gig, but all they do at 12 Tables Press is legal books.
That's awesome that you were able to connect with them and get it all worked out.
Yeah.
So, if I remember correctly, your motivation for writing the book was that you're filling a void where there wasn't anything really like good knowledge out there about the people who are the leaders of the most powerful institution in the country in terms of the decisions they get to make. So you wrote this to reveal like who are these people that led us, and maybe who were the more influential ones than some of the other ones. Some of them, it seemed like they just held the position. It was kind of it was a formality, but they didn't really do anything with it. So your goal was just to put more knowledge about the leaders of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and what I say in the preface is when I started law school, like you, I didn't have anybody in my family that was a lawyer. And so it was all foreign, right? You get this packet of stuff to read ahead of time, and at the top of the page, there's like 320 NE2 419. I'm like, what is this code, right? There's some secret code. And then we get into law school, and we never spend any time on who the justices are that write the book or wrote the opinion that we're covering, or what state it's from, or it's the Supreme Court of the United States. That they're abbreviated. And so I've always thought that the judiciary, the third branch, a co-equal branch of government, is not transparent, and nobody really knows about it. But like you said, I didn't want to write this book from like a legal textbook side that I could sell to law schools that they could use to teach some kind of course or something on the Supreme Court. What I really wanted to do was to just have it be an accessible book so that everybody can understand the Chief Justice, but the court itself as well, and kind of the times we've been through. Because that's the other thing. Like, you do the steel seizure case of Truman in the 50s, and most of us never even think about, okay, that's the Korean War, and that's the reason that this was a big deal in the first place, right? Because it's condensed. And so that was kind of my goal here, was to kind of give us a history of the Supreme Court through the 17 men that have been the Chief Justice throughout our history, up through and including Chief Justice Roberts, while also talking about the court in general and talking about some of the cases that were key from each of their tenures.
The certain justices were more influential than others, so you kind of explore like how the time shaped the people that were there as well. So it's kind of it gives you the context of the time period that these justices were leaders in, and how that influenced them and what they were going through, and maybe why that influenced policy that we see coming out of the Supreme Court.
We do, and you and I, we both graduated from the John Marshall Law School. As you know, the name changed recently. And so one of the things that, again, as an amateur historian and researching this, I wrote about John Marshall and all the other justices. And so what's come out in recent years is a book came out a few years ago, right around the time that I was finishing my book, that explored John Marshall. And he's from the 1700s. He's from Virginia, but the evidence that's coming out, for example, with him, is that he not only owned slaves, but he was actively engaged in it, would buy and sell them to improve his property and do other things. Unlike Jefferson, he didn't release him at his death. And so there were also a number of cases that the court held, although a lot of the cases that the Supreme Court heard during John Marshall's tenure in the early to 1830s covered had to do with slavery in the District of Columbia, which was federal territory. But in any event, a lot of that wasn't in any of his bios, right? And so what you learn about this process as well is that you never can fully uncover everything, right, that's there, because you have to rely on secondary sources, right, and primary sources as well. But this book does look at the influence of some of the justices, and of the 17, if you rank them and try to figure out like influence and the courts themselves, and how they relate to the current court and our current country. As my son said in and I mentioned in a footnote, he was my main editor. There's a big lull, right, from the time John Marshall stepped down until the 1910s, really. So almost an 80-year period, where the court was kind of just at its kind of low point, right, in terms of rights and in terms of interpreting things. And so, to me, it was a fascinating study, and again, wanted to make that accessible, and like you said, to think about the influence that some of these people had in our history.
Well, I was trying to think of a good summary for people, who aren't lawyers, or who, for most average people, they know the president, they know the Congress, because these are the people that you see out there doing press conferences, and you know who they are, and you know the things they did, and maybe some of it pisses you off, or you're rah-rah, right, on the other side, or whatever. So people know the president and the Congress, but they don't know the Supreme Court as well. And although it is a public forum, it's an open forum, and I don't know if I'm using that term correctly. Not so much forum, but it's a public.
Yeah, it's open.
Open for public viewing.
Right.
So, but the difference is we don't get to know the justices as well, because they don't do press conferences, and they're not running for election or anything like that. So most people don't know, who these people are and everything. But I guess to come full circle, if I were to explain this, and you can add to it or subtract from it or revise it, the reason the Supreme Court matters, or courts in general, but certainly the Supreme Court, is that they are the last check on all acts of government, state, local, and federal. So if the president does something that is not constitutional or is otherwise not legal, the United States Supreme Court is very powerful, because they have the power to say that you're not allowed to do that, to tell the president that they're not allowed to do that legally, and that's what I would think. I would convey that to regular people. What would you say about that?
I completely agree. The judiciary is the body. That's the last word. There's appellate courts. There's 13 federal circuit courts of appeal that in many cases are the final body, because the Supreme Court of the United States this past term heard and decided, I think, 65 substantive cases. There's thousands of cases that occur all over the country, but they are the final word. What I always say is that they don't have the power of the pen. That belongs to Congress, or to the president. They don't have the power of the purse. That belongs to Congress. All they have at the end of the day is the power of the word. But like you said, they're the final interpreter. If a law is not appropriate, the Supreme Court of the United States will say so. And again, there's always controversy. There's talk about whether it's an extremely conservative court. There's a lot of evidence that this court has gone back to what's known as the Lochner Era. So Lochner was a case in the early 1900s, had to do with bakers in New York City and working extreme hours. The legislature said that's unhealthy. A lot of Irish immigrants in these things, and Germans and others as well. And the Supreme Court said, nah, that's the ability to contract, right? People can do whatever they want. Freedom of contract. There's some talk that that's come back, and that the current Supreme Court's a very activist court. You see this in the voting rights cases, right? The Voting Rights Act, when it was reauthorized in 2006, was almost unanimous in Congress, and George W. Bush signed the reauthorization into law. And in the last couple of years, my column in the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin on Monday is about it, 40 years in the making. They've really taken over and said, "Nah, that we don't care what Section 5 of this says or Section 2." We, as a Supreme Court, say that that's not appropriate, right? And again, the best way that a government can work, in my opinion, is that Congress should have great latitude in the laws it creates, right? Because it's a body that represents the entire country. You got two senators from each state. You got 435 House members, and if something gets through those two chambers, to me that's what we should follow. But you're right. That is the power of the Supreme Court is that they're the last instance of review, and what they say goes. And again, they don't have any power to enforce it, right? So the thing about the United States of America that we've had since the beginning of the Supreme Court is that this body issues these rulings, and sometimes, like with Brown versus Board of Education, some states resist it, but eventually everybody falls in line, right? Because it's just that kind of, okay, as a Supreme Court, they're the final word, final arbiter of disputes, we're going to follow it, right? And so somehow eventually every state follows suit.
Well, also, if somebody tried to disobey the court's ruling, I mean, if it's president, my guess would be they'd end up being impeached. Like, Congress would impeach them if they tried to go against, what the Supreme Court says that they are interpreting as the law.
Right.
I would imagine that would be that check, right? Like, if a president's going to get out of line, then although the Supreme Court's not going to go down there like a parent and you can't do that,
right,
and we're going to stop you from doing it, then probably Congress would act or something.
You would think Congress would act, or, and do something. And again, it'll depend on who the president is and what the makeup of Congress is. But yeah, generally, at some point, if somebody's not obeying the rules, then there'll be consequences at Congress, right? They'll try to enforce it, or they'll try to rechange the law to address whatever the court has found to be a weakness in that law.
And you mentioned the ability of Congress to have pretty wide latitude in making law, probably because we have to change with the times to tailor laws to what is going on, the current state of technology and the evolution that we have as a country. The Constitution itself is this great document. It's specific in some places, but very general in a lot of places, so that it's more of like it represents these principles that we try to follow, but the exact path to that goal is not exactly spelled out, and that's where the Supreme Court comes in and kind of fills in blanks as to what this is going to mean and what policy we are going to have as a country and what laws we will allow based on that.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So, in terms of the level of influence of a given justice and how they, because to explain to people further, your Chief Justice is the person who is the leader of the court and makes various decisions about how the law is going to be put out, which judge will be the judge's name on it, who is going to say that this is what we are interpreting as law here in America. Give us, like, I don't know if we should go through every justice, but at least the ones that are influential. We talked about Marshall just a little bit,
yeah,
going all the way up into the 1900s. I'm guessing some of the most influential justices have been, or chief justices have been in the 1900s. What do you want us to know about given justices from the start, where the direction they went in, and who were the most influential ones and why?
Sure. So the first three were John Jay, John Rutledge, and Oliver Ellsworth. And in the first several years, a dozen, I think, years, that those three were Chief Justices of the United States. There wasn't many cases because you think about it, a new country, you haven't really set up the lower courts, and they're not fully going. Most of the disputes are about borders and about, water rights and land rights and where the borders of states exist and Native American issues and things like that. So they only heard 61 cases in the first 12 years, or decided 61 cases. John Jay wrote some of the Federalist Papers that many people are familiar about, but he only wrote a couple because he was sick. He was president of the Continental Congress, which was under the Articles of Confederation, so he Was that a figurative person? He resigned from the court. He went over and did a treaty, a Jay's Treaty, and then when he came back, he was asked to go back on the Supreme Court, and he said that there was no prestige, there was no function really, it wasn't a job that he had any interest in. He became governor of New York. John Rutledge was the second. John Rutledge was not happy with the John Jay Treaty that I just mentioned. On the way, he was from South Carolina, so he got a recess appointment by President Washington to become Chief Justice. And on the way up to New York, the capital at the time, he said that George Washington would be better off dead than to have signed the Jay Treaty. And so, and he had like a pig's head on a stick and stuff. And so when the Senate got back into session in December of that year, Congress, he was the first Senate nominee to be rejected by the Senate. He lost 10-14, and so he went home and tried to kill himself in South Carolina, tried to commit suicide.
Just because he didn't get the...
Well, he had some other issues as well. His wife and mother died around the same, I think on the same day or in the same month, right around that time, and so he had a mental breakdown. And some of his servants saved him from the river that he was trying to get into. I don't know if it was the Charleston River or what it was. Oliver Ellsworth then came in and was there for a short period of time. Oliver Ellsworth's more famous because he was one of the people at the Constitutional Convention, and he's really the person that designed the Constitution. At one point they had like 19 different resolutions, but it was just in kind of a jumbled long list. And he was the committee of detail. He put the whole Constitution together and massaged it, and then it went back to the Constitutional Convention to get approved. And so he was more influential because of his stuff outside of the Supreme Court than the Supreme Court itself. The one thing that he did, though, a couple things he did. One was that he started to write opinions as one body. Before that, they wrote them all individually. All 7 justices at the time, or 6, would write their own opinions. And he started that process of the court speaking as one voice. The other thing that he did ahead of John Marshall was ahead of Marbury versus Madison. He was the one that originally said, no, the court's the final arbiter. That's what the Constitution says. That's what kind of the debate was about for the judiciary. We have to be the final arbiter because, right, the president's elected, like you said, Congress, all elected. Those are well-known sources. There's political pressures. We don't have any political pressures. And then John Marshall comes along, and John Marshall did Marbury versus Madison. There's a number of other cases. And again, when you look at influence, when you look at the influence of the court for a long period of time, you look at what makes a good influential justice. In his case, and in the other ones I'll talk about where they were influential, it was the ability to really drive the court towards one cohesive message, so that there wasn't all these things like that. Part of the problem with the Supreme Court these days, again, and I've written about it, I've posted about it on LinkedIn, I write about it in the Daily Law Bulletin, is you see some of the lineups for opinions, and as to Part 2B, everybody joins except for Justice Alito, and for Part 2A, everybody joins but not footnote 3. And so nobody really knows, like, what the hell is this 42-page opinion? What does it really tell us about things, right? So Marshall was good at that, and there's a lot of stuff in my book and elsewhere that talks about he was kind of a driving force so that people did not dissent. They kind of just were a unanimous court, right? And so he was kind of that intellectual, politicking, friendship, his wine at nighttime. They used to live above the Supreme Court. They lived together. And so there was all of that. They rode circuit where they used to go to different courthouses around the country. And so just his force of nature, his personality, his intellect, and leadership, he's one of the more influential people. He was followed by Roger Tawny. Roger Tawny issued the Dred Scott decision, which is considered one of the worst decisions in the history of the court, that said that the fugitive slaves from states were property and had no rights. And so he's often considered the worst justice because of that. And so Tawny was the second longest serving justice and served in that capacity. And then you go through Chase, Wade, Fuller, White, and then President Taft became Chief Justice. President Taft never wanted to be president. He hated that job. His wife was really driving him towards being the president. When you look at President Taft, William Howard Taft, he always said that he was on the Circuit Court of Appeals for Ohio, and that was his favorite job. He became president. His term as president was kind of uneventful, right? He did some antitrust stuff and some other things, and the same with his Supreme Court kind of sitting for the short period he was on. But he really wanted to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, and he got that. And his biggest contribution to the Supreme Court is he designed and really pushed for the Supreme Court building that exists today. And he never lived to see it. But if you've ever been to D.C. and ever been in the Supreme Court building, it's a beautiful tribute to the judiciary. It's a beautiful thing. Before that, they were actually cramped in the basement of the Senate for a long time and didn't really have their own headquarters. And so that was kind of his pushing drive, right? He knew the levers to push because he was president of the United States. He figured out how to get money involved and great architects. He was followed by a guy that's probably one of the more influential guys, again, and that's Charles Evans Hughes. Charles Evans Hughes was on the court. He was promised the Chief Justiceship by Taft, but Taft actually put someone much older on the court. There's a long story that Taft was thinking ahead. I want to be Chief Justice, and Charles Evans Hughes is in his 30s or 40s. If he becomes Chief Justice of the United States, God forbid, I'll never be on the court, right? Because he's going to be the guy, and I'm not going to just be a justice. So Charles Evans Hughes was on the court from 1910 to 1916. He resigned to run for president of the United States, and then he came back and was appointed to be Chief Justice of the United States. Hughes came onto the court at a time when the court was very divided, very abrasive interactions amongst the members. And what again, Charles Evans Hughes did was he tried to take these 9 scorpions in a bottle, as one of the justices at the time said, and tried to cohesively get them again to focus on the things at hand and to lead a court ahead without the kind of rancor and kind of the issues that existed. And he was during the New Deal, and so you think of the New Deal and the court packing plan, it was Charles Evans Hughes that did a lot of that stuff to avoid the packing of the court that we, again, current time, we're hearing all this stuff about the commission that Biden has in place. And then there was Stone and Vinson. They each served a short period of time. Fred Vinson and his court had heard Brown versus Board of Education, argued, and then Vinson had a heart attack on the court, on the bench, and died. And Frankfurter and others said we should postpone this and rehear it in the fall. The next influential guy was Earl Warren. Earl Warren got appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States. One of the first hearings he had was Brown versus Board of Education. And there's very good historical evidence that if Brown versus Board would have been decided by the Vinson court the prior spring, it would have been 5-4 to uphold Plessy versus Ferguson, believe it or not. And so the only thing that changed between that court...
And for everybody out there, Plessy versus Ferguson is...
separate but equal.
Yeah, which was found to be not equal.
And Brown versus Board of Education. And what happened then is that Earl Warren, again, his politicking, he was a politician from California. He was Attorney General of California. He was governor. He was actually at one point was on all 3 tickets in Independent, Republican, and Democratic in California. He was such a popular governor. But in any event, Earl Warren comes in and says, we're not going to vote on this at conference. So every week when the court's in session, they meet on Fridays or Thursdays, and they talk about the cases they've heard, and they talk about what cases they're going to take, and they do it all in secrecy. There's only the 9 justices currently that are in that room. And what he did was masterful. He would come in every week and say, look, we're not voting on it. I don't want to even hear where you're voting, but I want you to think about this. If you come out in favor of upholding Plessy versus Ferguson, then you're saying that African Americans are inferior, right? And you need to think about that and think about the long-term effects. And so when Brown versus Board of Education was decided, nobody had seen the draft except for Earl Warren. He kept it in his vault every night in his thing. He would write in there, and then it got published. A very short opinion. It was unanimous, 9-0. That separate was not equal when it came to public schools. And again, when you think about that influence and some other things like in criminal defense and other things, Earl Warren was very influential, right? And the other thing I talk about with Earl Warren in the book, and I've talked about extensively about him, he's a fascinating guy to me because a couple things. One is he was the Attorney General of California when the executive order came to insure the Japanese. He was a big proponent of that, right? And it turned out on some fake evidence and things, but he was a big proponent of that. And then flip ahead a decade, right, and there's Brown versus Board of Education. He also, in California as governor, was the first person to integrate schools. So Mexican immigrants and white people, he integrated the schools in Southern California. And the other thing about Earl Warren that's interesting to me is that there were lynch Earl Warren signs, impeach Earl Warren signs down in the South and around the country. But it wasn't Brown versus Board of Education that did it. It was his criminal Gideon versus Wainwright, Miranda, and some of the other cases for criminal defense and Fourth Amendment cases. And what happened on election night in 1938, I believe it was, in California, he was running for re-election for Attorney General. His dad was bludgeoned to death in his house.
Earl Warren?
And Earl Warren's dad. It was never solved. And so you would think that this guy would be a hardcore, like, let's go after these people. He was also a prosecutor in California for a big part of his time before he was Attorney General. And so, again, Earl Warren, I think, is one of the more influential ones. And then we've had Warren Burger, who followed him. And Warren Burger is actually the Chief Justice that actually was on the Roe v. Wade case. A lot of people think that was the Earl Warren court, but that was actually the Burger court. 5 Republicans actually voted for that decision. And then he was followed by William Rehnquist, who's very influential, more because of the, kind of a pullback of some of the criminal defense rights, and also when it came to the death penalty and some other areas of law, William Rehnquist was very influential as well. And now we have John Roberts, and the jury's still out on John Roberts, and I know John Roberts is one of these people that, the conservatives sometimes are saying, look, this guy's not really conservative because he does certain decisions. But what's happening with John Roberts, I think, at this time is that he is really focused on, and a lot of people kind of poo-poo it, but he's very conservative, number one, but he's also very much a historian of the Supreme Court and wants to keep this kind of legacy and well, like we've talked about, they don't have anything but their power of the word, and if there's no credibility, or at some point the United States says, look, that the Supreme Court's BS, right? We're not going to listen to anything they do, anything they say, because they're bogus. That's a problem, right? And so he's trying to keep that, I think, as well, the legacy. So the
legacy and the prestige of the court is like,
right.
we should be listened to.
Right. And so that's 17 and as quick as I could do it.
That was good, man. Like, I realized, like, what a loaded question that is. Like, there's 17 of them. You wrote a whole book on there. But it shows that you have a mind for history and details and, like, the general story of it all. And you really conveyed that very well.
Thank you.
For sure. Obviously, Marshall was, had a lot of influence because of the decisions they made. Marbury versus Madison is that they have that power to review the other acts of government, and that's the way it's going to be. So it's kind of like that, like, this is the starting line for where we're going forward. Like, this is the point for that.
Right.
And to your point, with Justice Warren, I remember being in law school, and my criminal investigations teacher, Con Law 3 or whatever, right? Con Law 3, criminal investigations,
CSI.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's police investigations. He was, he talked a lot about how influential Chief Justice Warren was in terms of, like, the rights of the accused and everything, and criminal defendants' rights. And when I was younger, I was like, they don't deserve any rights or whatever. But the way our teacher explained it in law school is that the founding fathers, the reasons people who were arguing for the Bill of Rights is that people have, rights against the acts of government is because these people themselves were criminals.
Right.
They left England. He said we're not doing this bullshit of no taxation without representation and this and that, and like here's the rules we need to follow. And most of those things were probably, in the Bill of Rights and things like that were necessitated by the fact that necessity is the mother of invention, and they've went through this before, and these would be the ways you would combat that type of government behavior, is to have these things: freedom of speech, religion of the press, the right to keep and bear arms, the right against unlawful and unwarranted searches and seizures, and all these things. And it makes a lot of goddamn sense.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because without those things, the government can do basically whatever they want.
Right. And it's the old adage, the king can do no wrong, right? And the king, look at the king's court and the queen's court, right? It was members of the royal family or their, heavily patronaged underlings. And so, yeah, that I agree with you. And, I think that the criminal defense rights, I like you said, I think it is kind of that, right? We were committing treason by splitting with them and doing other things, but also because that they saw some abuses, and so it was like, you have to give at least a fighting chance, right? You have to do it fairly, right? You can't just come in and barge in people's houses every night, because that's not a good sense of community, right? And you have no sense of privacy or safety in your home if somebody can just barge in and like look through your cabinets, right? If I were in here now and were the government and going through your cabinets,
what are you doing?
Right?
Why are you going through my paper?
Because, man, I'm going to find some crime, right?
I hope not.
I hope not.
I
too.
know not.
Right.
But yes, no crime around here. Just stacks of paperwork that need to be scanned in and emailed out to people. And oh my God, lions and tigers and bears! Oh my, paperwork will kill you.
It will, and not by paper cuts, but just by the pure volume of piles of shit.
Pretty much, people don't realize that killing you physically is not the only way to do it. If you kill somebody mentally, they got no brain left. They're barely lucky they're flying on autopilot anymore, and that's what all this damn paperwork will do for you.
That's for sure.
I get to some paperwork sitting on the desk or whatever. I'm thinking, well, I haven't used this in 6 months. I don't think I'm ever going to use it again. It's probably time to go. You know what I mean? This can go somewhere else. And if I need it again, I guess I'll dig through my computer and find it and print it out, or my emails.
That's part of it. But what I've found is sometimes I get rid of stuff, and then you do have a need for it, and it's like, holy crap! Now like you said,
I shot myself in the foot.
And sometimes I can't find it. Right? You just can't. Our computers and the way it indexes and stuff, and emails even, sometimes I'll type in something and be like, why did I get 500 things? It's not like a Google search, right? And then I'm looking through like, where's the word that I even typed in the search is even in these documents? And so sometimes it's like a goose chase, and a wild chase. And so, but I'm the same way. I keep looking at stuff. I'm like, since COVID, when I've gone back to the office, and I go back to the office, a couple times a week, I make it an effort. Like there's piles on the floor or different folders. I kind of try to go through at least every day a little bit of stuff. And like you just said, I haven't looked at this in 6 months or 15 months now because of COVID. How important could it be, right? Why do I need to be looking like a slob in my office with all this shit that I don't need, right? It's obvious that there's no need for it.
Well, it's tough, and people don't understand like the amount of paperwork you have for. It's like the biggest family tree I've ever seen. Like all the paperwork that comes out of one case or one client's file. It's like it's hard. It's hard to keep track of all that, and then you don't want to look unprepared either. So now you got all this stuff, all this extra paperwork.
Right.
So, here we are with the current Supreme Court, Chief Justice John Roberts leading the court. A lot of people are worried. I think they say in the media that Republicans are more worried about who ends up getting on the court, and for good reason. I mean, these people are the final say on all acts of government, so it's pretty important that, you make sure you get the one you want, or that that'll be the best leader for the court. Of course, the conservatives are picking the ones they think are going to be conservative, and then when they saw the Obamacare decision, they freaked out, and they're like, what did we do here? Because we thought we had a solid vote on our side, but Chief Justice John Roberts says that, we're okay with this. It's just a tax, and it's fine. So it's interesting. I mean, where we're at right now, what is there anything that you see coming up or a direction for the court, just to maintain that respect for the court as a body?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I alluded to earlier, and I think that's troublesome. And I agree with you. In some cases that the court comes out and this term, everybody's bragging about how great they got along and some of the wild alignments. But when you look at the last couple of cases of the year, especially the case about Voting Rights Act and in the Arizona case that affects Native Americans and others, to me that's the thing that's the most troubling for our democracy. And you see, like Texas now again is going through a period of special session where they want to do things that will make it very hard for people to get out and vote. I wrote about, for my column on Monday, about John Roberts in 1982 was a young attorney. He was an advisor to the Attorney General of the United States, and there was the Voting Rights Act was being amended, and the Supreme Court decided a case that had to do with Section 2, which was what was up at this stage. And he wrote a series of memos talking about how to attack it and to get rid of racial equities and things. And so 40 years later, you jump ahead, he finally got that in the most recent decision. But one of the things I talk about is that immediately after Shelby County versus Holder, which decided that the pre-clearance was no longer necessary, the day that decision went down, the North Carolina legislature introduced a bill that did super gerrymandering and other things to make it much harder to vote. And that's a concern for me because, again, we always talk about, Scalia and some people talk about, the legislative process. It's the people that are empowered that are to make the rules. But the reality that we're facing in the United States right now is that that's not happening. You look at the popular vote, you look at some states and the way that they skew things, and to me that's a big concern. Is voting is one of the few things that we have as a power as citizens, and if you're not allowing people to vote, now that if you're trying to get rid of fraud and things, I get that. But the biggest thing that I'm seeing is that in the Supreme Court saying we're not going to get into gerrymandering anymore. If you give us any reason, we're going to take that as valid, even if it's absurd on its face, that it's not a racial gerrymandering, which happened in Texas in a case called Perez versus Abbott that I wrote about in my column for Monday as well. Those are the types of things I think that this court will be judged upon, and I think that those types of things are the things that, if anything, leads to this court packing that's been talked about. It'll be those efforts, right, to suppress the vote, because the reality is that whites like Mitch McConnell are becoming minorities in this country, and that's the reality of our nation, right, as we grow and continue to be a melting pot. And so I have concerns about that. I think that going back to Earl Warren, he said the biggest case he ever did was the one person, one vote. That was more important even than Roe v. Wade, or not Roe v. Wade, Brown versus Board of Education. And the reason he said that was because, again, that right to vote, every one of us should have an equal right to vote, and so that's a concern of mine. Next term, there will be another case called Dobbs. That's an abortion case that will be decided by the Supreme Court. But again, that's, to me, that's one of those, whether there's a right or not, we'll leave to another day. But it's really the voting rights cases and the gerrymandering cases that concern me, and we'll see how those go in the future. So.
Yeah, just to make sure, and to what you said earlier was just the reason that packing the court with people who are like-minded or who share the same vision is that if they take away, is taking away voters' rights to really choose, who is it going to be that's going to lead us and what kind of ideology they have and policy we're going to have going forward based on that. So you're saying right now the concern is that it could be a court that's packed with people who want to or believe that the policy should be that voter rights are diminished or reduced, or that it's all right to restrict them more on what could be racial grounds. Or
yeah, and that's what we have, and that's the other thing that really concerns me is that the the way that we've handled the last 4 nominees to the Supreme Court of the United States, starting with Merrick Garland, and then Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, is that the rules have changed. Mitch McConnell's been very manipulative of those rules. I think what happened with Merrick Garland was not appropriate. And again, I think that pushes the argument that it is politicized, because, like you're saying, what Mitch McConnell's tried to do is get a 6-person majority. And if Breyer were to announce his retirement this year or next year, I keep telling people, expect Lindsey Graham and the Senate Judiciary Committee, the equal vote on that, to block any nominee and come up with the same bullshit that let's wait till the next midterm elections, right? Because that's always the case, right? And so the last Democratic justice that was confirmed by a Republican Senate for a Democratic president, you know what year that was?
What year?
1895.
Repeat that one more time for people. The last time.
The last time that there was a Democratic president in the White House.
Yeah.
And a majority in the Senate Republican, and they confirmed the Democratic nominee to the Supreme Court of the United States was Rufus Peckham in 1895. That's the last time. And a lot of that some of that has to do with in the 1900s, for a long period of time, the Senate was democratically controlled. But that's not been the case for, obviously, Democratic Senates. And the other thing I always talk about is the fact that people tend to forget that Anthony Kennedy was confirmed in 1988, the lame duck year of President Reagan, by a Democratic substantial majority in the Senate.
Yeah, it's funny that how it works. I feel like the Republicans have gotten the better of the process of controlling who's going to be the next Supreme Court justice. I don't know why the Democrats don't take a harder stand on that. Not that it always works out, of course, because some of the justices that do get nominated to the Supreme Court do rule in ways that it would be inconsistent with what people thought they were going to do. But I feel like there's like a little bit of a double standard, when it comes time to nominate the new justice, Obama didn't get a pick, like we're going to wait. But if the tables were turned, it's like, well, it's like we got to do this, right away, and blah blah blah. When it's like the Republicans' turn, but and believe me, I'm more in the middle politically than anything else, and I'm also fairly civil libertarian leaning as well. But I feel like, Obama doesn't get to do this pick. You have to wait for however long until Trump gets in, and then Trump gets the pick. It's like if that happened during when Republican was president, like, well, we're going to do this right away. I feel like there's this weird double standard out there.
It is, and that's to me, it's a corruptness of the process. I don't think very highly of Mitch McConnell for a lot of reasons.
You mentioned his name a few times.
Part of it is he's just a crass. I think he's a person without a moral compass. Honestly, he's a crass politician, and he changes stuff, and it's all just bullshit. And he's bought and paid for by big business, which is fine. But there's a lot of instances. For example, the last case decided this term was Americans for Prosperity. Amy Coney Barrett should never have been involved. She should have recused herself. Why? $3 million was given by the Americans for Prosperity to advocate her for the Supreme Court. To me, that's a problem.
I agree.
Yeah.
The whole structure of government we have here, the Constitution, it's a good foundation, it's a good blueprint, it's a good map to what we should have, but unfortunately the way it works out in reality is that we as everyday citizens, as working people, have very little discretion over what happens with our money, our tax dollars, and the process. Like, we do get a vote, but what these politicians, especially in Illinois where we're at right now, what they do with your money after it is, there's no accountability for it.
None. None. And a lot of it's wasted and paid to patronage and all kinds. Yeah,
the influences that you're talking about, like, it's like you should recuse yourself because you're taking money from somebody, who, what I mean? Like, you had donations from people that are supporting this or that, and so you're beholden, or not beholden, but you are more likely to be influenced by them. the powers that be, the big business or whoever, whatever agendas that are out there, they're donating money, end up ruling the day. You see it play out in policy a lot.
Here's the most recent example, and not to pick on Justice Thomas and his wife, but Justice Thomas recently wrote an opinion that said that the marijuana laws in the United States are not useful and perhaps unconstitutional. Well, the next day it comes out that Ginny Thomas, his wife, has a substantial major investment in a marijuana production company or something. And so again, just this crass politics, right? It's like, okay, and that's the kind of stuff at the end of the day, no matter what Justice Roberts does or the court tries to do to be amicable and friendly, and Breyer coming out and saying, look, we're not a political branch. When you see those types of things, when you see the fact that, and I've wrote about it in the book, but I've wrote about it extensively elsewhere, $7 million was spent by the right to block Merrick Garland's nomination, and then for the next 3 nominees, more than $20 million was spent by dark money. The guy that's one of the influential people of the Federalist Society started a new $80 million super PAC that's super secretive 2 years ago for judiciary. And so again, we don't know who's paying this money, but I don't know about you, but nobody that's given that kind of money to politics is doing it for an altruistic reason, right? There's a reason that you're betting on your horses, right? That are the Supreme Court nominees. If you're spending tens of millions of dollars to get them on the court, then you're the people that show up at the court, the Chamber of Commerce and other legal groups and things, advocates. That's a problem to me again, because we don't know that as society, right? And so we think that we're on a checkerboard or chessboard, and they're playing, there's money underneath the table or whatever, right? Or there's at least the appearance of that. And so again, concerning, but probably nothing we can do about it. We're not going to solve that problem anytime soon, you and me.
Well, at least we're talking about it and we're able to do that, because right now, you got a lot of things going on in China, and that's people are even scared to use that word to talk about like the things that are going on there with labor camps and concentration camps, and just the control of information, the lack of freedom of speech. And if you speak out about the Chinese Communist Party, which is is probably the world's biggest criminal organization or whatever, you know what I mean, you got to apologize on television and do it in Mandarin or something like that. So at least we have the power and ability to speak about it. So
that's important.
You know what? The biggest changes I guess we can make are at the community level, and I think Chicago's lucky to have good people like you here. You've done Lawyers Lend a Hand and donated to charity through powerlifting, and you've helped out a lot of nonprofits, and just you're a good father to your boys and a good husband to Ann. And so if we can't change the bigger level stuff, and we can't change the devil worship of influence in our politics and our judicial decisions, at least we can be good members of our community. And I think you're one of the best people I know for that, and I'm fortunate to have you as kind of an example. And I was thinking about you earlier today, the thank you method of networking by Dan Cotter. Like I had an event last night. One of my friends, Cindy Mesa, she had her birthday, and so this morning I was thinking about like who all did I see there, and I'm kind of like, it's almost like a meditative moment where you're trying to recall,
right?
Who was at the event. I'm like, let me reach out to them and say, it was nice to see you. Like I meet a lot of people, and I've been fortunate that I form good relationships with them. I work with them, but that's not going to happen with every person, and that's all right. You're not meant to work with every person necessarily, but it's good to know them and to be friends with them, and just to be blessed enough to have those people in your life where you can talk to them, even if you're not like business partners, and that's cool. So I was thinking about you earlier with the thank you method of networking.
Well, cool. Yeah, and right back at you. It's been great having you in my life, and look forward to many years of friendship and seeing your business grow, and just our friendship continue to thrive. So thank you.
Absolutely, brother. And more to come soon. Obviously, COVID put a damper on everything. For a long time, I wanted to bring Sarah out. We could all have a dinner so she could get to know you better. And so we'll do that now. We'll have plenty more options.
We'll figure it out. Yeah, it's nice to see. Yesterday I was downtown working, and we walked to lunch, a couple of colleagues and I, and it was nice to see on Michigan Avenue, like a lot of people on the sidewalks again, and just the activity, because for weeks and months, even after we started opening up, it was kind of a dead zone. And so it's really, to me, it's kind of nice to see people getting back and feeling comfortable to just get back out and treat life like it should be, right? Is to enjoy company, have some good food, some good laughs, and some good friendship.
No, I agree 100%. You know, it's very weird to go to the ghost town that we had during COVID and the shutdowns, and you know, the everyday life that we live is stressful, but it does have a flow to it, and you know what to expect, and the predictability is a good thing, because without it threw people off a lot mentally, and so we're not out of the clear yet. Who knows what is going to go on going forward with this, with variants, and you know, are we going to be stuck with it forever? Will, you know, greater influences out there prevail, and will the truth about it come out too? Because
Sure.
I have a hard time believing the penguin bat, you know, story where they, you know, had lunch or bit each other or something, then they walk back 1,000 miles to a wet market, and then it spreads all over the world. You know, like it seems more likely that it was a lab leak, and
It could be.
you know, so
We may find out.
I would hope so, but I heard that there's a possibility that we were, as a country, as the United States, were providing $200 million a year toward research in Wuhan to find out what they call gain of function, or how these viruses spread, and to try to avoid pandemics. And then the very money that we're using may have actually led to a lab leak that literally screwed up the whole world economy. And perhaps maybe that's why we're not hearing more about it, that you know,
Yeah.
about the truth of the matter. But it would be nice for it to come out. I feel like the whole world deserves to know, you know, what really happened with all this and everything.
No, I agree, and I think we'll see. And you know, I think some people blasted that we gave money, but that's, you know, science, and we do need to find and make sure that we understand these things. And you know, that's, you know, if you look at almost anything the government spends money on that's valuable, it's that kind of learning things and preventing things, right? And to understand. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they use the money for. What you know, was this a lab leak? Was it intentional, or was it negligence? Probably it could be negligence, right? Just
I would think negligence.
Right.
I don't think it would be that
I don't think that
malicious.
they were-
That it would be
right.
intentional. Like, oh, here's what we're gonna do, you know, and here's how we're gonna do it. I think it was probably, if it was a lab leak, which I think most likely probably was. You know what I mean?
think so,
Whether
too.
they admit or not, but to know, and it was, like I said, I don't think there was malicious intent. It was probably negligent, but
right.
wow, what a doozy that was for the whole world. Like, if we believe as a society that this type of research needs to be kept on going, we're gonna have to think really good and hard about the safety procedures that are in place and what's gonna happen, because we're really playing with fires when you're like
Right.
when you're altering viruses in a lab. That's crazy, man. You know?
It is.
But anyway, we covered a whole bunch of stuff.
We did.
Great conversation, man. You have a beautiful mind for recall of details and facts and years and names, and God bless you, man. Whatever genetics you have, or whatever vitamins you're taking or food you're eating, I got to get on that level, because I'm underslept, probably overhydrated with some adult beverages or whatever from even before it was my friend's birthday. I felt like I was dragging a little bit. I'm like, I know what I want to say, but then it leaves my mind for a second and it comes back, whatever, you know.
No, it's been great. This has been fun, and you know, I love the Blessed Life University we talked about, and thank you for having me on the podcast. And look forward again, like I said, to continue to watch you do great things. And you know, it was great meeting your wife today and seeing your office, and we'll do this again sometime. And you know, who knows what, you know, when we find out the solution to Wuhan, you know, what happened. It might be a separate episode, right, about to get, like you said, safety and, like, you know, public health, you know, instances, and you know, how do you conduct safe experiments, you know. And when I was in high school and we did the chemistry stuff, there was always kind of like, you know, fails, right? And then there was all this shit around that if the thing blew up or something, you're supposed to pour like the powder on, right, and stuff, because people knew that, you know, it's experiments for a reason, right? That's what, you know. So in any event, but thanks again for having me, and this is really enjoyed, as always, chatting with you, Brian.
For sure, it's something that we could have did over a bite to eat, but I like to share these conversations with everybody else, and hopefully people out there listening will find some good value, some good entertainment, like the sound of our voice, and keep on listening. Before we go, tonight is the Poirier versus McGregor fight, UFC. Do you follow that a lot or no?
A little bit. My brother-in-law follows it a lot, and you know, I'd like to see McGregor win. I like McGregor.
Yeah, he's a savage. I do like him as a fighter. He has said some things outside of and done some things as well outside of fighting, or outside of the octagon that disappoint me, because
Right.
I look at this young man and like he's the face of Ireland kind of right now. He's their most popular celebrity,
Right.
and I would just think that in terms of somebody who's almost like a statesman, that he would have a little more that he wouldn't act in ways that are embarrassing, you know what I mean, and that are not right. Like I said, he said some racial stuff during the Mayweather fight that I thought was not becoming of the person who is the face of Ireland right now, their most popular person out of that country. But as a fighter, I mean, he's a predator. I was just. So do you see the last couple of fights between Poirier and McGregor?
I haven't seen them. No, I've just seen the highlights, but no.
You'll see some of them if you're going to watch it tonight.
I think I am. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that main fight won't be on until about 11 or 11:30 at night, because I think I'll have to look. But if the card's in Vegas, the normal is you have the preliminary fights, which are the up and coming fighters a bit more that they've made matches with. Then the main card will start probably somewhere around 9, and you'll have 5 fights on there.
Yeah.
And McGregor's will be one of them. It's going to be interesting. I think I love mixed martial arts, and like I said, it's funny because like I don't like fighting. I wouldn't want to do it anymore. I couldn't imagine getting hit in the head by somebody,
Right.
especially if it's repeatedly. Jesus Christ. But watching it, it's just such a cool battle of will and skill and who's going to prevail, and exciting things can happen at any time. And I guess that's part of the barbaric part of our civilization. We like to watch people beat the shit out of each other, but
Right.
McGregor is he has a lot of weapons in his arsenal. Dustin Poirier does too. I feel like if McGregor wins, he has to win on the mental warfare ground. He's the
Right.
kind of guy, if he gets in your head, he'll catch you slipping, you know what I
Right.
mean? Whereas if you're not in his head, like Dustin Poirier proved in the last fight, like he could dismantle this guy. He got him with a lot of leg kicks, and then when his leg wouldn't work anymore, he was a lame duck and just got smashed and knocked out.
Right.
So, and the funny thing is, I feel like McGregor looked past that fight too, because he the whole time he was in the ring, and even in the lead up in the pre-fight press conference and all, he's doing a boxing stance the whole time. So I think he was getting ready to try to do a boxing match with Manny Pacquiao, or perhaps a
Right.
rematch with Floyd Mayweather. They were definitely talking Pacquiao, but after McGregor lost that fight, Pacquiao's team's kind of like, nobody likes a loser, we want a winner.
Right.
So if you had won, then it'd be like, all right, we're going to really build this up. He just came off this huge knockout victory of Dustin Poirier. Now let's everybody make $100 million each on this
Right.
Pacquiao fight. So I think he approached it wrong in the terms of just focusing on that one discipline. He stood there like a boxer and got his leg kicked out from underneath him, couldn't win. So I think mental warfare is where McGregor won it, and he did come back with more of that this time, although it didn't seem like some of the gusto from the past, some of these one-liners he'd hit people with. I didn't feel like there was a lot of that, but I do feel like he was trying to intimidate Dustin Poirier mentally as more of like a bully, which is the way he's going to win that fight. But skill-wise, I think it's anybody's fight. It certainly could be Poirier's, because McGregor, you got a guy now in there, Michael Chandler came over from Bellator, Charles Oliveira, and Justin Gaethje. Those are your best elite fighters in the world at 155 pounds. Not to mention Khabib, of course, because he's retired. He was the champion, the Russian champion for Dagestan. So those are your top guys. If he was back, he dominated pretty much everybody. He's fought all these top 5 guys. He beat McGregor, he beat Gaethje, he beat Poirier. By the second round, Poirier looked like he was completely sapped of energy and just void and depleted, and Khabib choked him out. He's like, it's almost like you could see the defeat in his face, like there's nothing I can do to stop this mauling that's going to happen for me. So it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out between McGregor and Poirier tonight. It'll be very exciting. It's anybody's fight. Dustin Poirier, super skilled fighter. McGregor's going to have to figure out how not to lose this time. So who knows? We'll see. It's either going to be a very disappointing night for McGregor or a very disappointing night for Poirier.
For one of them.
And maybe they'll do it 4 or 5 times and then all try to make millions of dollars every time.
Right.
Good to see you, brother.
Likewise.
It would be cool to have you back to just talk about some major court decisions that are coming up
Yep.
from time to time, or just like you said, maybe
Anytime, man.
if the truth comes out about the lab leak,
Right.
it would be good to trash it out with a reasonable mind like yourself.
Well, thank you.
Good to see you, brother. Stay blessed,
Likewise.
everybody. Tune in for the next episode. We love you. Peace.